I'm Al Walker. I'm from the Energy and Geoscience Institute at the University of Utah, and we are the Pac-12 football champions. And we were the year before too. So, okay. So I know we've done a little trash talking on California. We've been hitting them low, hitting them high. We've been knocking California football teams left and right for the last 2 years. So anyway, we're here to talk a little bit about what we do at the Energy and Geoscience Institute. I'll talk first about a couple items, and then Rob Simmons will take over and he'll talk about carbon management. The Energy and Geoscience Institute is partly on campus at the University of Utah and also off campus in Research Park, about maybe just about a half a mile south of campus. These are the things we specialize in, and I'll just touch on a couple of those, but we've been doing research for 51 years. We celebrated our 50th year last September, and during that time frame, we've delivered almost $1 billion worth of research, or about $1 million a month during our existence, and we're cranking out about one research project a month. Things that we specialize in are geoscience for exploration and production. Our bread and butter was oil and gas, and now we're starting to do a few other things, including carbon management and geothermal. We also do high temperature, high pressure drilling, and I'll talk a little bit about that when I switch to geothermal. And we're starting to add in things like a smart grid and energy management, or energy efficiency. First thing I'd like to talk about is our current project in Utah Forge. This is a huge geoscience project in Milford, Utah. This is funded at $220 million by the Department of Energy, and in the history of the University of Utah, this is the largest research project we've ever been granted. Currently, we've drilled 7 wells on this location, and 5 of those are monitoring and seismic wells, and 2 of those, one is an injection well and one is a production well. And I'll talk a little bit about those more. If you look at the diagram up here, you can see there's a blue well and a red well. The blue well was drilled last year. That's our injection well. It was drilled 8,500 feet true vertical depth at a total distance of 10,000 feet into solid, hot granite. This has never been done before that we know of, and what we're doing is we're taking the technology transfer we have from the oil and gas industry and transferring it to the geothermal industry. In oil and gas, obviously, we've drilled tens of millions of wells, and geothermal industries drilled a couple thousand. Anyway, what we found is that all the tools that we ran into that well as we were drilling failed. None of the isolation tools, none of the packers, none of that stuff could tolerate this environment, but the drill bit did just great. So we have taught the geothermal industry how to drill into hot, solid granite. You can see from this diagram that the rock that we drilled into is 200 degrees centigrade. That's 415 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's solid granite. So the blue well was drilled last year. Then we, again, using oil and gas technology, we proposed stimulation of that well. We fractured it in 3 different locations, put tracers in that and proppant in those fractures. And meanwhile, on those 5 surface wells that were monitoring wells, we put in microseismic geophones so that we could detect where the fractures grew. What we found is the fractures grew up and down from the wellbore, and we deliberately then came back earlier this year, starting in March and finishing in May, went 311 feet above the injection well and drilled directly into those fractures. We forecasted that the fracture tip half length was about 450 feet. We were deliberately trying to go 300 feet above that. We measured it 311 feet, and we encountered the proppant. So we were very confident that we had drilled into the fractures that we had placed in that injection well. We have since established communications between the injection well and the communications well, so we've proven that we can do this. And now we're working, we're going to do another fracture stimulation after the beginning of the year, and we are going to frack from the production well back into the injection well and try to improve the conductivity. Any questions about this? Because I'm going to switch topics now on what we're doing out there. Yes, sir. We don't have funding beyond this right now. We are seeking extension of the funding to go out till 2030, but right now we've only got funding from the Department of Energy through 2024. Now, I do want to point out that we are on SITLA land, so great thanks to SITLA. My understanding is that all the lands around us that are SITLA lands have now been leased up by commercial parties who are now going to follow the science that we've done and potentially commercialize this location. So we took a place out in Fillmore or Milford where there were no potable water, no human activity. We're 10 miles north of town, no endangered species, and it's a great place to do research. Okay. Any other questions on our enhanced geothermal systems? I hear. They're asking what the working fluid is. What are we injecting? Water. Fresh water. We're buying water from Milford and injecting it. And it's going to, when we're done with the system, it's going to be a closed system, so they're going to recycle that water. Thank you for that question. Yes?
What was the deviation on the production well?
About 65 degrees, yeah. So this is typically geothermal industry. They only drill vertical wells, and this was a highly deviated well, obviously. So, question here?
What kind of fluid system did you use for the frac? Those were temperature dependent, right?
Yeah, on this they pretty much used some cross-link gels and fresh water. Thank you. But the cross-link gels didn't work very well either at 400 degrees. Yeah. Okay, good. Well, I'll go on to my next topic then is a new program that we've run out, or we've let out at the Energy and Geoscience Institute, which is called the Resilient Energy Certification, or Engineering Certification Program. This is a program designed to go beyond sustainability to things that the industry needs to know about, such as how to deal with cyber, how to deal with misinformation, how to deal with the smart grid, and how to integrate all these things. So we're introducing a program which would be certification for senior engineering and science students and graduate engineering and science students, where they would take 5 technical electives and get a certificate in resilient energy engineering. I'll talk about these 5 programs, these 5 courses that we've got, and then to let you know that we are going to adapt this program. Right now it's focused on our College of Engineering and our College of Science, but this first cycle we are going to just have it for students. Next cycle we're going to modularize this program and introduce it so that everybody in the energy industry can benefit by participating in this program. So it'll be courses that industry can take, and you can sign up and take any module you wish. For instance, the Geoscience and Engineering for Transition, they will have 5 modules in that program, and you could pick any of those modules that you wish. And I know that the Energy Management course will have 6 modules, and so you could pick any of those modules that you're interested in taking. This first year, it's going to be very rigorous because it's got to be set up so that we can maintain our accreditation for our scientists and engineers, but we're going to modify that next year so that anybody, including my next speaker, who's been trained as a poet and lover, he could take on this course and succeed. The 5 courses, right now we started on August 21st, so we are in our second week of courses at the University of Utah. I've attended 2 of these classes so far. I would bring your attention to the one on the bottom, the Geoscience for Energy Transition, a talk by Dr. Razul Sorkabi. This course used to be called Geoscience for Petroleum Production, and we've added in we've kept the core of that course, but then we've added in additional information to deal with additional stuff like how do you evaluate science for carbon sequestration and those things like that. If you're interested in this program, that would be a fundamental course that I think everybody on Earth should take, but Dr. Sorkabi is a phenomenal author, or researcher, and instructor, so it's a course I would strongly suggest. The other 2 courses, which are currently being taught by our Dr. Bobby Mohanty on alternative energy technologies. He's going through all the alternate means, including hydrogen, solar, bio, all that sort of stuff. Bobby is a phenomenal researcher and inventor, so he knows how all these devices work and what all the shortfalls are on these devices that are being used to generate alternative energy. The other course is Dr. Masood Parvania, and his course is energy management. He's going to teach things like smart grid, cybersecurity, and and energy optimization. Again, a phenomenal teacher. He's taught this course in this form for several years. In the springtime, we'll have 2 additional courses. One's on carbon capture and utilization, which Rob will talk about next, about what we're doing there, but that's Dr. Brian McPherson, and he's one of the pioneers in carbon sequestration, so it should be a phenomenal course. And then the other one is being taught by a committee, and it's kind of like the capstone course. It's on energy entrepreneurship, society, and policy. I would envision some people in this room would be asked to teach parts of this, and it's one of these that's going to be, you're going to have a lot of guest speakers participating in this program. But that's going to be on the economics, what the business is like, and what we're looking for going forward as far as energy entrepreneurs. And I know one of the things too is policy. This is an outgrowth of a policy of a program we used to call Energy and Policy that was taught in our petroleum engineering program, and it's an adaptation to look at all the other forms of energy out there. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rob Simmons, who is also from the Energy and Geoscience Institute, who's our expert on policy, but he's also our director on carbon science, the Carbon Science Initiative. So, Rob?
Thanks, Al. Rob Simmons. I'm the director of the Carbon Science Initiative at the Energy and Geoscience Institute. And what Al was referring to is a definite value proposition of EGI, which is I'm a recovering attorney, and so EGI is helping me to sort of do something productive with my life. Just kidding if there's attorneys there. Anyways, so I'm lucky enough to work with some really dedicated researchers and scientists who are focused on carbon management, including carbon sequestration. So I'll talk a little bit about some of our projects, some of the work we're doing, and we do have a project out here in the Uintah Basin that we'll talk about as well. So as Al mentioned, our lead researcher, his name's Dr. Brian McPherson. He really pioneered carbon sequestration research and science, and was one of the pioneers, and he's been doing it for over 20 years. And about 21 years ago, So over 20 years ago, Dr. Brian McPherson was chosen to lead the Southwest Partnership. And the Southwest Partnership was an effort by the United States Department of Energy to look nationwide. So there was a number of different partnerships in different places throughout the country. And they wanted to establish a good, accurate estimate of how much capacity existed below ground in geologic formations to store massive amounts of carbon dioxide. So they were aware of the problem that as an industrialized society, we were producing a lot of carbon dioxide, and we didn't want to give up our quality of life, and so we recognized that we needed to reduce our carbon emissions, and how would we do that? And one approach the Department of Energy invested heavily into was carbon sequestration and storing the carbon below ground. And what they found out over the course of this project is throughout the country, there's actually billions of tons of storage capacity to store carbon dioxide. And some of the really high potential locations are in the Gulf Coast, but they also found out that the Intermountain West, including Utah, has some really remarkable carbon sequestration opportunities. And so that laid sort of the foundation for carbon sequestration research and science. And on top of that, the U.S. Department of Energy has now shifted its attention to looking a little bit more at how you encourage investment in carbon sequestration, how you get the private sector to actually spend money on carbon sequestration. And so we are part of this new, program for the United States Department of Energy, which is called the Carbon Utilization and Storage Project and Partnership. And as part of this, the goal is to really work with companies, work with industry, give them the tools they need so that they can invest and develop projects in carbon sequestration. And what's driving most of this are some really powerful tax incentives. So these are federal tax incentives. They're called 45Q tax credits. And these credits provide $60 a ton. So for every ton of carbon dioxide that you put into the ground for enhanced oil recovery, you'll receive $60 a ton. And for every ton of carbon dioxide you inject into the ground for non-EOR purposes, but for permanent sequestration, you'll receive $85 a ton. And so this has gotten industry's attention. And so there's a lot of interest now in developing these carbon sequestration projects. And one of the roles of our research team, and there's about 15 really great scientists and researchers, at least at the University of Utah, working on this. And one of our focuses is de-risking that investment by the private sector. So looking at what kind of research we can do to make sure that whether it's risk from, let's say, earthquakes or seismic activity or other risks that might be associated with injecting large amounts of carbon dioxide into the ground, how to de-risk that. And as I mentioned, we've been doing this for about 20 years. And during that time, we've been, through our research projects, have injected about 1 million tons of carbon dioxide into the ground. And so far, no earthquakes. So here in Utah, we do have a CUSP Utah project. So down by Cedar City, where they do some iron mining, there's a company called Utah Iron. And Utah Iron is developing an iron refining plant. And these iron refining plants are obviously crucial to our industrial society. It's crucial to produce iron here in the U.S. And so one problem, though, is it produces a lot of carbon dioxide. And so Utah Iron has partnered with us to help identify geologic formations near their plant, or their planned plant, that can take over 50 million tons of carbon dioxide. And so our team's currently working on that, and we're funded by the U.S. Department of Energy to work on that project. On this map shows the enormous potential for carbon sequestration in Utah. Starting with the light blue and then going to the darker colors all the way to black. The darker the color, the greater the potential is for carbon sequestration. That's referring to the amount of geologic capacity, so pore spaces and geologic formations, and how much carbon dioxide those geologic formations can take. And so as you see, with some of the dark colors, out here in the Uintah Basin, there's some excellent carbon sequestration resources. And from this map, one thing that's kind of important too is maybe some context. The scientists have estimated here in Utah that we probably have, well, hundreds of millions of tons of capacity to store carbon dioxide. So hundreds of millions of tons of carbon dioxide can be stored here in Utah. The issue is to make it economic and to make it safe. But recognizing this enormous potential, when I first started with EGI, and this was about 2.5 years ago, one of my first projects was to create a policy pathway for carbon sequestration projects here in Utah. So essentially a permitting process so you could permit the projects, and also you could address a lot of the legal issues and other things that would help industry to invest in these projects and actually develop these projects. So we had a great partner in the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining. Director John Boz, in particular, I want to thank for being such a great partner. But in 2022, we helped develop and pass legislation here in Utah for geologic carbon sequestration. The sponsor of the bill was former Representative Steve Handy, and then the Senate sponsor was David Hinkins, which many of you know. And this legislation provides a good pathway to develop commercial-scale carbon sequestration projects here in Utah. And then finally, one of our projects that we are working on, and we have about 9 or 10 projects throughout the West, and many of those are in Utah, but one of our projects that we've received recently $8 million of funding for from the U.S. Department of Energy is a project out here in the Uintah Basin. And this is called the Carbon Safe Phase 2 project. A boring name, but one thing that's exciting about it is it's a Phase 2 project, and there's also Phases 3 and Phases 4. And the goal of Phase 2 is to actually do the science, the engineering, to establish that there's a viable geologic resource out here in the Uintah Basin that can take at least 50 million tons of carbon dioxide. And so the likely source of that carbon dioxide, who we're working with, the Bonanza Power Plant, produces a roughly 3.5 million tons of carbon each year. And so the area that we've identified, there's sort of another bonus to it. The area we've identified, which is just sort of southeast on this map of the Bonanza Power Plant, is on a big sitla block, so on state trust lands. And because of that, as we develop this project, and if we can show that there's a viable geologic formation that can take enormous amounts of carbon dioxide, as we move through these phases and we're able to hopefully develop a full-scale carbon capture and sequestration project, the revenues, which are sizable, would flow to the school system here in the state of Utah through the lands that the School Institutional Trust Lands Administration administers. So we're very excited about this project. We're extremely excited to work with the community, different stakeholders, and make sure this project is a success. And with that, I will take questions. Oh, and I do have one more slide. Al would be mad at me if I didn't do this slide. So, sorry. So the Energy Geoscience Institute, which is made up of about 60 scientists and researchers, they do a whole bunch of different types of research. We only, Al and I were only able to sort of share a little bit about some of the highlights today. But if you want to learn more about all the different kind of research and research projects that's going on at the Energy and Geoscience Institute, luckily coming up on September 18th through the 21st, we'll be having our annual technical conference. And this will include sessions on geothermal energy, including enhanced geothermal systems, carbon capture and utilization and storage, oil and gas, of course, critical minerals, energy efficiency, smart grids, and it also include a tour of the Great Salt Lake. So it's free. You'll learn a lot of fascinating things. It will be at Research Park, which is right next to the University of Utah, at the Marriott, which is at Research Park. And we just hope everybody can come. And with that, any questions? Well, yes.
How long are you expecting this phase 2 that you're doing here?
Yeah, sure. So the Phase 2 project is scheduled for 2 years, and that will include drilling a stratigraphic well, which will provide our researchers with the data they need to really determine whether there's a viable carbon sequestration site here that can be used to store massive amounts of carbon dioxide safely. So that'll be about 2 years, but depending on how it's progressing, we'll probably immediately start going into Phase 3 and applying for Phase 3 money, which goes up to about 50 million, and then Phase 4 money is about 100 million. Any other questions? Well, thanks so much for your time today.